everyone, and welcome to the Fantasy Football Geek YouTube channel. So I'm Rob, otherwise known as FPL Vet on Twitter, and I'm here today to have a chat with you about my current Game Week 1 draft. So before we begin, I think just a couple of things to say. First of all, an apology. I've not done too much FPL related over the last few weeks. A couple of reasons for that. I was quite heavily invested in the Euro 2020 fantasy games, so I decided afterwards it would be good just to take a couple of weeks off from fantasy football full stop. So I didn't look at anything fantasy football related for a couple of weeks after the Euros finished, and thought I would come back a bit fresher as a result of that, particularly with the FPL game launching so early and there being such a big temptation to tinker and things. So it's only really in the last week I've started to get my head back in the game, so to speak, sort of seriously on that. The other thing before we start is just a quick disclaimer. This is my first YouTube video, so apologies if it's a little bit rough around the edges. I'm not a computer whiz by any means, and I don't have a lot of fancy gadgets and IT stuff, but I'm kind of hoping that the content will make up for that a little bit and you enjoy what I've got to say over the next sort of 10 minutes or so. So here goes, and please bear with me, and I'm hopefully going to do a few more of these through the season, and I'll try and sort of sharpen things up as we go along in that respect. Okay, so first things first, I think quite a lot of you are probably regulars on the Fantasy Football Geek website, and you will be sort of familiar with my writing style and things. But for people who are new to the site, a little bit about me, so that you're convinced that I am someone to listen to about fantasy football, and I'm not just some random who's playing it for the first time. So I've been playing fantasy football in one shape or form for quite a long time now. I started back in 1994, around about the time when the Dylan Skinner show was on BBC Two. That's me showing my age. And I played draft games initially with my friends. Then it was newspaper games with kind of postal transfers or telephone transfers. And then the internet came along, and things got a little bit easier. And I got into FPL seriously, I would say, in the 2012-2013 season when my friend's mini league shifted across to this format, and I've been hooked ever since. I've had some good finishes through the last few years. I think I've been pretty consistent since I sort of went from being a casual player in 11-12 to a more serious one in 12-13. I've only finished outside the top 100k once since that time, so that's pretty good. I hope I don't curse myself for this season on that. I've got two top 10k finishes, one of those inside the top 5k, and I had a good season last year. Finished 12,780th out of 8.3 million players, I think it was, so pretty pleased about that. I've got what I would call a sort of a blended playing style. There's different contributors on the site who have got different playing styles. You go from John, Fantasy Football Geek, who has this very kind of set playing style which is based around a template. Someone like Andrew Whitfield's very similar to that as well, very template based sort of player. But then you've got the other extreme. You've got someone like Costas, for example, who's big into sort of differentials, takes a lot of points hits. You've got someone like Keith, who takes a lot of points hits as well. Tends to focus very firmly on sort of teams with good fixture runs coming up. And there's loads of different ways to play the game. There's not one way that's right. You've got to find a style that kind of suits you. And I've got this kind of slightly mixed playing style that kind of draws on a bit of all of those, basically. I make my decisions based on a few factors. I watch quite a lot of live football, so that helps. So there's a lot of eye tests going on with me, but I also look at stats quite a lot as well, and I listen to podcasts, and that's where I try and sort of draw my information from. And as such, I think I can adapt my playing style sort of according to the needs of the sort of season. But I tend to follow a bit of a structure. The first sort of 10 to 15 weeks of the season, I'll play fairly aggressively. I'll be quite happy to make early transfers to get some value into my team. Quite happy to jump on bandwagons through that part of the season. I usually play my wild cards somewhere around about game week 8, game week 9, but sometimes a little bit later, just depending on sort of what's going on with my team, sort of injuries and things like that. And then I tend to sort of settle down a little bit into more of a sort of a template style. Don't tend to take too many hits after that. Look for sort of differentials outside of the core, so I'll have sort of 7 or 8 template players as my core, and then look for differentials sort of around that to gain ground. So that's a little bit about me. If you're convinced that my playing style kind of will help you, then great. And I say if you prefer to sort of look for something a bit sort of different, then have a look at the contributors. We've got plenty of different playing styles amongst us, and I'm sure you'll find a contributor there who sort of fits the bill for you. So with that behind us now, let's have a little bit of a look at how I'm approaching game week 1. And there's a quite a nice post that Geeks put through on the sort of the Patreon site, where a lot of the contributors give a tip for game week 1. I'm not going to go into too much detail and kind of pull all those together. I've just given a few of my own tips for this, and these can be useful if you're a player playing the game for the first time this season, or if you're a more experienced head and you fancy just tweaking your playing style a little bit. The first one there is probably a little bit obvious, plan for a few weeks in advance, but I see a lot of players who go into game week 1 and basically just set the team up for game week 1 and the fixtures in game week 1. You've got to, with your opening team, think a bit beyond that. You've got to look 4, 5, 6 weeks in advance, at the very least sort of 2 or 3, and sort of plan your team for that. So it might sound a bit sort of obvious that, but I think that's quite a sort of a key point really. Following on from that a little bit, I quite like to roll my transfer in game week 2 to give me 2 in game week 3. I think where you can roll a transfer, it's always advantageous. 2 transfers in a game week you can do a lot more with rather than 1. And obviously if you need to do something else with that one and take a points hit, then it does sort of cost you. So with that being said, I try not to book any transfers in advance for game week 2. I think this happened to quite a few people last season, where Bruno Fernandes obviously missed the first game week because Manchester United, I think, didn't have a fixture, and a lot of people kind of booked a transfer for game week 2 to bring Bruno Fernandes in, and then other things happened to their team and it kind of cost them a points hit elsewhere. So try and plan not to book your transfer there. The third point I would make would be to try to go predominantly for players who have a good track record in fantasy football and also offer you game time security. Now, I'm not saying don't go for the odd kind of risky player differential here and there. I think 1 in your game week 1 squad's okay, 2 maybe okay, but beyond that you want to try and go for fairly sort of safe players if you can. There have been players in previous seasons who have gone against the grain in that respect. I think back to sort of Michu of Swansea, back in 12-13, he came in with no track record at all and hit the ground running and had a great season. But generally players like that, they're the rarity. It's more common that players who are new to the league or maybe being promoted, will take a bit of time to find their feet. So not too many risks there for that game week 1 team. And the other thing I've put alongside there is to try and have a bench, and I think that's important this season. Players are coming off the back of pre-season. There might be injuries and things after the Euros, and also with COVID as well. We've got to still take into account that there might be COVID call-offs, particularly in the sort of the first few weeks of the season, where fans are mixing into grounds and teams are mixing again. So we need to take that into account. And the last point, again, it might sound like a bit of an obvious one, but don't panic if you don't get off to a good start. If you're ranked in the first few million in the first 3 or 4 weeks, it most certainly is not the end of your season. I think back to John's team last season. Going into game week 10, he was still at a 7-figure ranking, and no panic there from John. He just stuck to his game style, played his own way, and ended up with a fantastic finish at the end. So don't start making rage transfers, risky transfers in those first few weeks. If you have a poor start, you don't need to do that. It's a long game. This is 38 game weeks. It's not 1 game week. It's about going the distance. A couple more points just to sort of bear in mind. balance your team up at the start of the season. So I'm not a big fan of going too heavy in one area, and I think this could be a problem this season. I see a lot of teams going very big in defence in game week 1, and I'm a little bit loath to do that. There is some great value there, but there's also a lot of premium options this season. And it's going to be difficult to fit kind of more than 2, maximum 3 into your team. And if you need to get sort of a different one in and you've got a lot of funds tied up across 3 or 4 players at the back, it then becomes more difficult to shift your funds into this one premium. So I think it's quite a good idea to have a bit of flexibility in that respect. The next thing to consider is you need to look at who your captains are going to be over the first few weeks. I've put the one of the tickers up from John's from Geek's website here, and it's actually the defensive schedule one, but it can still sort of be used for kind of the attack players as well, using the sort of colour coding on that. And looking across the game weeks, game week 1 we can see Liverpool have a good fixture, Chelsea have got a good fixture, so we're thinking Mo Salah maybe for captain there. Game week 2 again, good fixture for Liverpool, Mo Salah. Man City have got a good fixture there, so they could be a captain choice. Game week 3 is a bit of a trickier one. Liverpool have got Chelsea quite solid defensively, so that this is the week. Man U away to Wolves. City are home to Arsenal, so maybe City's your best choice. I don't know on that one. Spurs home to Watford could be an option, but there could even be a differential captain in there. I mean, we've got West Ham against Crystal Palace, for example. That could be quite a nice differential captain option, and so forth from there. So try and have a look at the next few weeks and make sure you've got your key captain options picked up, so you're not having to jump around on premiums. You're trying to free up value from elsewhere. You've got this kind of planned and mapped out and advice. And the same goes to the fixtures in general. That's the next point. Try and pick out teams with good fixture runs. So the tracker here on the screen, it's listed for your defensive schedule. So Brighton are at the top defensively, Liverpool and Everton, Watford following up. And look for swings within this as well. So there's a couple of fairly good swings here at game week 4, for example. Wolves have a good fixture swing here, so that's when I might want to start eyeing up a Wolves defender or keeping an eye on Jimenez as a potential replacement striker. Arsenal have got a swing at game week 4 as well. Chelsea, beyond this chart, have a swing at game week 7, so keep an eye on these and have an idea of when you might want to bring players in from these teams. Right, without further ado, here's where I am with my team at the moment. So first things first, my core players. So these are premium players. We've got captain options and a premium in the back here. So my two predominant captain options of the first few weeks are going to be Mo Salah and Bruno Fernandes, and that probably doesn't come as any surprise to you. These guys have got high effective ownership. They're proven track record in fantasy football. They can get big double-figure hauls, so they're great options for captaincy. They're also very highly owned, so if you don't have these players, they're going to be heavily captained, so if they get a return, they're going to really hurt your overall rank here. I've picked out these two as I think my favourite ones at this sort of stage. They've got a good game time security. There's other sort of premiums obviously in the game, players like Kevin De Bruyne, Raheem Sterling, Harry Kane, Sadio Mane, or wherever Harry Kane ends up, of course. So these are other options as well. But I think for the first few weeks of fixtures, these are the two who I'm probably going to be putting the armband on. So they're in there. So the other premium player I've picked in my core here is Trent Alexander-Arnold. He's the most expensive defender by quite a long way, but I think he is worth it. I think Liverpool are quite high up on the defensive schedule over the first few weeks, so we're looking at hopefully getting some clean sheets from them. But we know that Trent is really good for attacking returns as well. He's great for assists. He takes a lot of set pieces. He's good for the odd goal as well. So I think he's a great option for the first few weeks, and probably indeed for most of the season there. So he's in there in the back. Right, on to the mid-price players. So this is where it starts to get a little bit trickier. I've got a second premium defender in here. At the moment it's Luke Shaw. There is a little bit of a doubt about his fitness for game week 1, so we'll keep a monitor on that. But there are other players who can be flipped to here. So if he's going to be out, we could flip to another Man United defender. If Maguire's fit, he's an option. Wan-Bissaka is another option there. So there are options in that respect. There's other 5.5s at other clubs, so Coutinho, for example, has good fixtures at the start, good for attacking returns. Everton, maybe a little bit of an unknown this season with the new manager, but we're quite high up on the fixture ease schedule at the start, so could be a good option there. So there's a few possibilities in that 5.5 bracket. So although Shaw's in at the moment, that's not sort of set in stone really. I'll go to the forwards next. I think there's really good value in the mid-price forwards this season, and the three I've got there, I've got Antonio of West Ham, Wilson of Newcastle, and then my third one is my one sort of risky player in the team, and that's Tony of Brentford. He's a bit of an unknown. Until today, I did have Watkins as that third striker, but Danny Ings has surprisingly gone under the radar as a Villa signing today, so that does make me a little bit concerned about Watkins' position. Things is coming into the team. Is Watkins going to continue to play as a striker? Is he going to be pushed more out wide, and how is that going to affect him? So we need to keep a bit of an eye on that situation with Villa, and obviously there's the Grealish situation there as well. If he moves to Man City, which is beginning to look more likely, how's that going to affect the output of the Villa strikers as well? So that's why I've come off Watkins at the moment and gone on to Tony. And then we've got the mid-price midfields. Now, this is a more difficult bracket, definitely. There's not many players between 6 and 7 million who take my eye, and very, very few sort of under 6 million. Similarly, there's some quite nice players from sort of 8.5 million up to kind of then the sort of the low premium players. I've got Havertz in there at the moment at 8.5. Any kind of attacking player of Chelsea comes with a little bit of risk, and we'll get maybe a little bit of an early read on this because Chelsea play in the European Super Cup before game week 1, so we'll get a bit of an idea where Tuchel is kind of going. But I do worry a little bit with the Chelsea attacking players that the Palace fixture might be perceived as an opportunity to rotate a little bit. So he's in there, but he's a bit of a wait and see. And there's a couple of others I've got my eye on there. I like the look of Mahrez in pre-season, so he's worth a look in the Community Shield. A little bit of a step up in price to 9, so he I think is worth a look in that regard. And even someone like Son. Son's up at 10 million, but this is a guy who has scored 200 points in the last couple of seasons, and even if Kane goes, I think Son will take on a kind of a more talismanic role for Spurs. He's going to have the lion's share of set pieces. He'll probably be on penalties, so he could actually be a really good option at that price. The slight downside with Spurs is the early fixtures, but they game week 2, game week 3 onwards, once you've got that City fixture out of the way, become a lot more appealing. So going back to kind of the mid-price midfield, I've picked Harrison there at 6 million. There are a couple of other options around there. Rafinha is very popular at 6.5. I slightly favour Harrison just because it's 0.5 less. Pretty good returns last season, pretty similar between the two players in terms of their output. You've got Buendia there at 6 as well, who's another option. As I say, Villa are a little bit of an unknown, and I've already got a risky pick there with Tony, so that's why Harrison's in there. So that's where we are with the mid-price players. So on to the budget players, and this is where I've sort of filled the team up. I'll start quickly with the midfield 4.5. There's not a lot in this bracket. It's pretty lean pickings here. So 4.5 midfielder, this is really going to be a bench player in most weeks. So you want someone really just with game time security, and if they do get the odd attacking return, then there's a bit of a bonus. Brownhill at Burnley seems to be the best option. It seems quite heavily favoured, sort of. In the FPL communities, so he's in there for me at the moment, but there's others to keep an eye on there, like sort of Gilmore from Norwich, for example, would be another one, so keep a watch on that. And then filling up in defence and sort of the goalkeepers, so I've got 3 4.5 defenders there. They've all got good fixtures at some point over the first 6 weeks, so they can be sort of rotated around alongside kind of my 2 premiums there. So I've got Veltman at Brighton are at the top of the schedule for sort of fixtures. I've got White at Arsenal have got that fixture swing around game week 4, and I think White will be fairly sort of game time secure with them. Ayling at 4.5 is a popular pick for Leeds, but I actually slightly favour Llorente. I think Llorente gives you a little bit more attack threat. Ayling's posted some fairly decent stats in some respects last season without really getting any returns of that, whereas when Llorente came into the team he did offer an attacking threat, so that's why I've gone for him over Ayling at 4.5. But I think Ayling could be construed to be a good pick there as well. Leeds defensively, towards the second half of last season really tightened up against the sort of the mid to lower table teams. So I think very good fixture pits. I think against the top teams they were still conceding a lot of big chances. So I'm not entirely sure whether I'd sort of play them in those games, but they're certainly very good for the mid-table down games, I think. And then for my keepers, I've gone for the Watford duo. Sanchez is a popular pick at 4.5 as well, but I like Bachmann because I think potentially you're going to get more save points and bonus there than you are from Sanchez. Brighton don't seem to sort of give up a lot of chances. I think the save points are a little bit sort of lower there. So yeah, that's why I've got the Watford combo. Obviously looking to spend as little as I possibly can. Goalkeepers, it's the position with the sort of the lowest ceiling, and there doesn't seem to be the value in that bracket that there has been in previous seasons, maybe with sort of Martinez and Pope and players like that who are a bit more expensive. So just sort of finishing up now, I've put some watch lists up on the screen here. So if you don't use the watch lists on the site, then that's sort of up to you. But I find them quite useful, and I've put a few players in there who I'm going to be keeping an eye on over the first few weeks, and to help me when kind of fixture swings come along. And I think the key thing to say is if you're using the watch lists, then remember to update them as the season sort of progresses, and take players off, put them on as they're maybe sort of ticking boxes on the eye tests and sort of stats tests and things. And I think my final thoughts is that team I put up there certainly is not set in stone for game week 1, and there are almost certainly going to be changes there, and we need to keep an eye out, particularly for team news over this weekend. Through the last set of pre-season friendlies, through the Community Shields, and through the Super Cup as well. It's going to give us some clues for game week 1. And there's loads happening on the transfer front as well. Obviously today we got that surprise transfer of Ings going to Aston Villa. Kane still really uncertain. It's looking like he's probably going to go to City, but we don't know. Grealish is looking like he's probably going to go to City as well. So this changes the picture kind of quite a lot for these teams and for these players. I think if Kane goes to City, he almost becomes a player you really want to get in your team, because he's potentially going to score a lot of goals, score a lot of points, and be a very heavy sort of captain option. There's a rumour going around today about Chelsea trying to sign Lukaku as well. So again, if he goes to Chelsea, suddenly you've got a fixed striker there at Chelsea who's probably going to play every week and probably going to score quite a lot of goals as well. So the situation is certainly very fluid in that respect. And finally, just keeping an eye out for injuries and COVID. COVID situations over the next couple of weeks. I'm not quite sure how things like the self-isolation picture affect Premier League players. I'm under the assumption that a lot of them are only single vaccinated at the moment, just on the basis of their age and things, so that might still play a factor, whether they're excluded because of elite sport. So I don't know the specifics of that, but I'm sure someone will come along with some more information on that. So that's it for me. For this first YouTube video. I hope you've enjoyed my ramblings there, and they've helped you and been of benefit when you're thinking about your team. I'll be posting my team on Twitter probably just before the deadline on the Friday, but there'll be a written sort of write up on the contributors part of the Geeks site sort of before that, as per usual. Don't forget to like and subscribe the YouTube channel here, and give us a follow on Twitter as well. I hope you've enjoyed this, and good luck for game week 1.